Albert Fischer, a 35-year-old tech billionaire, felt like a nervous teenager as he waited in the exclusive Vanguard room of the Blackstone. He had built Fisher Analytics into a billion-dollar empire, yet sitting here for a blind date was his greatest source of anxiety. His CFO had insisted on the date, stating Carmen McBroom, a top-tier real estate agent, was perfect. What his CFO truly meant, Albert knew, was that she was the kind of woman who might finally overlook the wheelchair. The thought made his jaw tighten. He'd been paralyzed for 8 years since his skiing accident. The door opened. Carmen walked in, dressed in a tailored black sequined gown that radiated ambition. She was striking, but the moment her calculating eyes landed on his chair, her professional smile froze. The hostility was immediate. "Marcus didn't mention that you use a wheelchair," she stated, making no effort to hide her disgust as she pulled her chair back from maximum distance. After a tense, minimal exchange, Carmen set down her water glass with a snap. She leaned forward, declaring him a catastrophic distraction and an unnecessary liability to her social and professional image. She informed him she had standards and wasn't interested in being known as the woman who dates a charity case. She stood abruptly and walked out without a word. Albert sat frozen, acutely aware of the onlookers' pity and stares, the public humiliation washing over him. "No," Albert choked out to the waiter. "Just bring me the wine list." The waiter disappeared, leaving Albert alone with the aftermath of Carmen's cruelty. The exclusive dining room of the Blackstone suddenly felt like a fishbowl, every wealthy patron witnessing his humiliation. He could feel their stares, some pitying, others simply curious about the spectacle they'd just witnessed. A billionaire, rejected and abandoned at his own table. Albert's hands trembled as he reached for the water glass Carmen had left behind, the lipstick stain on the rim mocking him. 8 years. 8 years since the skiing accident that had stolen his legs and apparently his worth as a romantic partner. He'd built Fisher Analytics from nothing, created algorithms that predicted market movements with terrifying accuracy, negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet none of that mattered when a woman saw the wheelchair first. The worst part wasn't even Carmen's rejection. He'd half expected it. The worst part was that Marcus, his own CFO, had set him up with someone who would treat him like damaged goods. Did everyone see him that way? A charity case desperately grateful for any attention? If you can't stand people who judge others based on physical ability rather than character, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Type "Nobody deserves that," because what happened next changed everything. Albert stared at the empty chair across from him, Carmen's perfume still lingering in the air. He felt hollow, exposed. The public nature of the rejection made it unbearable. Several nearby tables had heard every word: catastrophic distraction, unnecessary liability, charity case. Those words would echo in his mind for weeks. He considered leaving immediately, but pride kept him rooted. He wouldn't give these people the satisfaction of watching him flee. The waiter returned with the wine list, his expression carefully neutral, professionally trained not to acknowledge the emotional carnage at table 7. "Excuse me." Albert looked up to find a young woman standing beside his table. She wore the Blackstone's standard black service uniform, but her eyes blazed with barely contained fury. Her name tag read Claire Roberts. She wasn't his waiter. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I watched what just happened, and I cannot stand by and say nothing." Without asking permission, she pulled out the chair Carmen had vacated and sat down. "That woman is everything wrong with this world." Albert blinked, stunned. "You're going to get fired." "I don't care." Claire reached across the table and gently took his hand. The gesture was so unexpected, so profoundly kind, that Albert felt something crack inside his chest. Her hand was warm, steady, completely unafraid. "You are a complete, worthy man. What she did was cruel and inexcusable, and you deserved none of it." For the first time in 8 years, Albert felt tears threatening. This stranger, this waitress, risking her job, was offering something no one had given him since his accident. Unconditional validation. Not pity, not awkward sympathy, just raw, honest compassion. "Why would you do this?" Claire's grip tightened. "Because my grandmother has been in a wheelchair for 12 years. She raised me after my parents died, and she's the strongest person I've ever known." Her eyes glistened. "When I see someone treat another human being like that woman just treated you, like you're somehow less than, I see every ignorant, cruel person who's ever made my grandmother feel small. Nobody deserves that." Before Albert could respond, Mr. Henderson, the restaurant manager, appeared. His expression was stern, but not unkind. "Ms. Roberts, you're aware this violates protocol." Claire stood, but didn't release Albert's hand immediately. "I know, Mr. Henderson. I'll accept whatever consequences come." Henderson sighed, glancing at Albert's face, then back at Claire. "5 minutes to finish your conversation, then back to work." He walked away. Claire sat back down, and Albert found himself smiling, actually smiling, for the first time that evening. "You really didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Claire's smile transformed her entire face. "I'm Claire, by the way. Claire Roberts." "Albert Fischer." "I know who you are. Fisher Analytics is kind of famous. But right now, you're just Albert. A man who deserves better than Carmen McBroom." They talked for 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. Mr. Henderson made no move to intervene further, occasionally glancing over, but allowing the conversation to continue. Albert learned that Claire was 28, worked 2 jobs to pay for her grandmother's medical care and living expenses, and dreamed of opening her own restaurant someday. "Cooking is love made visible," Claire said, her eyes bright with passion. "When I make someone a meal, I'm telling them they matter, that their presence is worth my time and effort. Food is connection, not just sustenance. Albert found himself opening up in ways he never had before. He told her about the accident, the stupid moment of overconfidence on an expert slope that had changed everything. He described the isolation that followed, the way his wheelchair had become a filter separating genuine people from those who saw him as a burden, a project, or worse, a novelty. My grandmother says people who can't see past the chair aren't worth knowing, Claire offered. She says it saves her time. The shallow ones disqualify themselves immediately. She calls it an asshole detector. Albert laughed, a genuine, full laugh that surprised him. Your grandmother sounds incredible. She is, tough as nails and twice as sharp. Claire glanced at her watch reluctantly. I really do need to get back to work, but... She pulled out her phone. Can I give you my number? I'd actually like to continue this conversation. Albert's heart hammered. I'd like that too. A lot. They exchanged numbers, and as Claire stood to leave, she squeezed his shoulder gently. For what it's worth, Albert, I think Carmen McBroom is going to regret tonight for the rest of her life. She walked away from someone extraordinary. After she left, Albert sat in stunned silence. The humiliation from an hour ago had transformed into something entirely unexpected. Hope, real hope. Someone had looked at him and seen the man, not the disability, not the billionaire, not the wheelchair, just Albert. He texted her before he even left the restaurant. Thank you for tonight. Would you have dinner with me this week? Fair warning, I'm cooking. Her response came within minutes. It's a date. Fair warning, though, I have very high standards for pasta. Albert smiled as he wheeled himself toward the exit, ignoring the lingering stares. Carmen McBroom had tried to break him tonight. Instead, she'd led him straight to Claire Roberts. The following Saturday, Claire arrived at Albert's penthouse carrying a bottle of wine and visible nervousness. Albert had spent the entire day preparing, obsessing over every detail. His penthouse was fully accessible. He'd designed it that way. But more importantly, he'd planned a menu that would showcase his passion. Welcome to my kitchen, he said, opening the door with a genuine smile. I hope you're hungry. Claire stepped inside and gasped. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city skyline, but what truly caught her attention was the state-of-the-art kitchen, every surface designed at wheelchair-accessible height. Albert, this is incredible. Cooking became my therapy after the accident, he admitted, leading her to the kitchen island. When I couldn't control my legs anymore, I discovered I could control flavors, temperatures, timing. It gave me back agency, a sense that I could still create something beautiful. They cooked together, fresh pasta with brown butter sage sauce, roasted vegetables with balsamic glaze, a simple arugula salad. Claire moved around his kitchen naturally, anticipating what he needed, never treating him less capable. They talked about everything, her grandmother's declining health, Albert's complicated relationship with his family, their shared guilty pleasure of terrible reality TV shows. Over dinner, as candlelight flickered between them, Albert found himself confessing his deepest fear. I worry that I'm too much responsibility, that eventually whoever I'm with will realize the accommodations, the logistics, the reality of my disability, that it's all more work than I'm worth. Claire set down her fork, her expression serious. Albert Fischer, let me be very clear about something. You are not a responsibility. You are not a burden. You are not a project or a charity case. You are just Albert, a brilliant, kind, funny man who happens to use a wheelchair. That's it. That's the whole equation. But practically speaking, Practically speaking, Claire interrupted gently, every relationship requires accommodation and compromise. My grandmother taught me that. Love isn't about finding someone who needs nothing from you. It's about finding someone whose needs you're honored to meet and who feels the same way about yours. She reached across the table and took his hand. I don't see a wheelchair when I look at you. I see someone who makes me laugh, who challenges me to think bigger, who cooks better than most professional chefs. That's what I see. Albert felt the defensive walls he'd built over 8 years beginning to crumble. I'm falling in love with you, Claire. Good, she whispered, her eyes shining. Because I'm already there. They kissed for the first time that night, and Albert understood what Claire had meant about love being a choice to see the whole person. She wasn't overlooking his disability or bravely tolerating it. She was accepting all of him, including the wheelchair, as part of the complete package of who he was. 3 months into their relationship, Albert received an urgent message from his board of directors. Sterling Capital, one of the most prestigious investment firms in the country, wanted to meet immediately. Led by Randall Sterling, a traditional finance titan known for his Midas touch, Sterling Capital could inject $500 million into Fisher Analytics, the kind of investment that would catapult the company into a completely new stratosphere. The meeting took place in Fisher Analytics' glass-walled conference room. Randall Sterling sat at the head of the table, 60 years old and radiating old money authority. His suit probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He smiled at Albert with patronizing warmth that made Albert's spine stiffen. Fisher, your company shows remarkable promise, Sterling began smoothly. The predictive algorithms you've developed could revolutionize financial forecasting across multiple sectors. Sterling Capital is prepared to invest $500 million for a 30% stake. Albert's CFO nearly fell out of his chair. The other board members exchanged excited glances. This was the deal of a lifetime. The kind of investment that would cement Fisher Analytics as an industry titan overnight. However, Sterling continued, his smile thinning, we do have some concerns about public perception and company image. Albert felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. What concerns? Sterling pulled out his phone and placed it on the conference table. On the screen was a photo of Albert and Claire at a charity gala the week before. Clearly happy, clearly in love. This relationship is, to be frank, optically problematic. Miss Roberts is a waitress with no social standing, no industry connections, no strategic value to the company. Our investors expect a certain caliber of association from our portfolio company CEOs. If you believe that a person's worth isn't determined by their job title or bank account, hit that subscribe button. People like Randall Sterling won't.
And you need to hear what he demanded next. "You're asking me to end my relationship," Albert said flatly. "We're asking you to make a business decision," Sterling corrected smoothly.
Miss Roberts is a distraction, a poor fit for your public image. Frankly, Albert, dating service industry workers raises questions about judgment and priorities. Our offer stands at $500 million, but only if you demonstrate the leadership maturity to prioritize your company's success over a fleeting romance. Albert's CFO leaned forward eagerly. "Albert, this is $500 million. Think about what we could accomplish with that capital. Expansion, acquisitions, market dominance." "I am thinking." Albert interrupted, his voice deadly calm. "I am thinking about what kind of man I want to be, what kind of company I want to lead." Sterling folded his hands patiently. "Let me be perfectly clear. This offer expires in 48 hours. End the relationship with Miss Roberts or walk away from the deal. Your choice, Mr. Fisher." The board members stared at Albert expectantly. His CFO's expression was pleading. $500 million. The kind of money that would secure his company's future for decades. All he had to do was give up Claire. All he had to do was prove Sterling right. That relationships were transactions, that people had monetary value, that love could be priced. Albert met Sterling's eyes. "No." "Excuse me?" "No," Albert repeated, stronger now. "I will not choose a balance sheet over the person who taught me to love again." The conference room fell into shocked silence. Sterling's eyebrows rose. The board members froze. Albert's CFO looked like he might faint. Albert continued, his voice gaining strength. "Claire Roberts has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire investment portfolio, Mr. Sterling. She sees people as human beings, not as strategic assets or liabilities to be managed. That's not a flaw in her character. It's a devastating flaw in yours that you can't recognize her value." Sterling's face reddened. "You're making a catastrophic mistake, Fisher. $500 million is worthless." Albert cut him off. "If I have to become someone I despise to get it. Claire risked her job to defend me when someone publicly humiliated me. She saw me as a complete person when the world told her I was broken. You're asking me to repay that love by treating her exactly the way Carmen McBroom treated me, as disposable, as less than, as strategically inconvenient." He shook his head. "I'd rather lose every dollar I have than become that person." "This is insanity." "The only insanity," Albert said coldly, "is this conversation lasting longer than 5 seconds." He turned to his board. "Anyone at this table who agrees with Sterling's assessment has 1 minute to resign. Otherwise, you're fired. Effective immediately." 3 board members stood and left without a word. His CFO stayed, pale but nodding slowly. "I'm sorry, Albert. You're right. I let greed cloud my judgment." Sterling stood, his expression icy with fury. "You'll regret this, Fisher. You're throwing away your company's future for a waitress." "The only thing I regret," Albert said, "is wasting an hour of my life listening to a man who measures human worth in dollar signs. Get out of my building. Now." After Sterling stormed out,
Albert sat alone in the conference room, his heart pounding. He'd just walked away from $500 million. For most CEOs, it would be career suicide. For Albert, it was the easiest decision he'd ever made. He called Claire immediately. When she answered, her voice was bright and warm. "Hey, how did the big meeting go?"
"I need to tell you something," Albert said. "Sterling Capital offered us $500 million. Claire gasped. "Albert, that's incredible. That's life-changing for the company." "There was a condition attached. They wanted me to end our relationship. They said you were optically problematic for the company image, a liability." The line went quiet for a long moment. Then Claire's voice came through, small and hurt. What did you say?" "I told them to go to hell," Albert said simply. "I told them you're worth infinitely more than their money, and I fired anyone who disagreed. Claire, I chose you. I will always choose you." He heard her crying softly on the other end. "You walked away from $500 million for me." "No," Albert corrected gently. "I walked towards something infinitely more valuable, a life with someone who sees me as a complete person. You did that for me at the Blackstone, remember? You showed me I was worthy of love and respect. How could I ever put a price tag on that? How could I repay your compassion by treating you as disposable?" "I love you," Claire whispered through her tears. "God, Albert, I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you too. And Claire, I need to introduce you to my family, properly, this weekend. No more hiding, no more keeping you separate from that part of my life. I want them to know exactly who you are and what you mean to me." The Fisher family estate sprawled across 15 pristine acres in Connecticut, all manicured lawns and old money. Albert's mother, Camilla Fisher, had insisted on an urgent family meeting the moment she'd heard about the Sterling Capital disaster through her social network. Albert knew exactly what was coming, but he'd prepared Claire as thoroughly as possible. "They're going to be hostile," he warned, as they drove through the imposing gates. "My mother values image and legacy above almost everything else. To her, turning down Sterling's money for a relationship is incomprehensible." Claire squeezed his hand. "She can handle hostile. I dealt with Carmen McBroom, remember? Your mother can't be worse than that." The meeting took place in the formal dining room, a space deliberately designed to intimidate with its crystal chandeliers and portraits of stern-faced Fisher ancestors. Camilla Fisher sat at the head of the massive table, dressed in a cream Chanel suit that probably cost more than Claire made in 6 months. Albert's father, Robert Fisher, sat silently beside her, his expression carefully neutral. Camilla didn't waste time with pleasantries or small talk. "Albert, darling, we need to discuss this Claire situation immediately." "Her name is Claire Roberts," Albert said evenly, his voice calm but firm. "She's not a situation. She's my girlfriend, and I love her." "A waitress," Camilla said, her tone dripping with disdain. "A woman with no education, no connections, no breeding whatsoever. Albert, I understand you've been lonely, but this is embarrassing for the family. You're a Fisher. You have responsibilities. You can't be seen with someone so far beneath." "Someone who works for a living?" Claire interrupted, her voice calm but razor sharp.
She'd promised Albert she'd let him handle his family, but she wasn't about to sit silently while being insulted to her face. "Mrs. Fisher, I work 2 jobs to care for my disabled grandmother. I may not have your wealth or your connections, but I have something you apparently don't: the ability to see people for who they are, not what they're worth on a balance sheet." Camilla's eyes narrowed dangerously. "How dare you speak to me that way in my own home?" "No, Mother. How dare you?" Albert cut in, his voice harder than Claire had ever heard it. "Claire is the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's kind, compassionate, principled, and genuine. She risked her job to defend me when a woman you would probably approve of, Carmen McBroom, publicly humiliated me for using a wheelchair. She sees past my disability to the man underneath. Can you honestly say the same thing?"
Camilla stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. "You're throwing away your family's legacy, your company's future, everything we've built for this obvious gold digger. She's using you, Albert. Can't you see that? Comment real love over fake status if you're Team Albert and Claire. The entitled can't win. Now watch what happens when Albert makes his final stand." That's when Albert did something that shocked everyone in the room into absolute silence. He maneuvered his wheelchair to the center of the ornate dining room, locked the brakes with deliberate precision, and carefully lowered himself to kneel on the floor beside Claire's chair. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. "Claire Roberts, the day you sat down at my table at the Blackstone and held my hand, you saved my life. Not metaphorically, literally. I was drowning in loneliness and self-doubt, convinced that my disability made me fundamentally unlovable. You showed me that love isn't about perfection or status or meeting someone's arbitrary standards of worthiness. It's about seeing someone completely, flaws, challenges, wheelchair and all, and choosing them anyway." He opened the box, revealing a stunning sapphire ring that caught the chandelier light. "Will you marry me?" Claire's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course yes, 1,000 times yes." Albert slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her. And in that moment, his mother's opinion didn't matter. Sterling Capital's 500 million didn't matter. The portraits of disapproving Fisher ancestors didn't matter. All that mattered was the woman in front of him who chose to see his worth when the world and his own family told her he had none. Camilla stormed out of the room without another word, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. But Robert Fisher stood slowly and walked over to Albert, offering his hand to help him back into his wheelchair with surprising gentleness. "Son," Robert said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "I think you just made the best decision of your life. Welcome to the family, Claire. Truly." The aftermath of the proposal was complicated. Camilla refused to speak to Albert for 3 weeks, communicating only through icy text messages about family disgrace and social embarrassment. But Robert remained supportive, calling regularly to check on them both and offering quiet encouragement. 2 months after the engagement, Claire gave her notice at the Blackstone. Mr. Henderson, who'd given her those crucial 5 minutes with Albert, smiled knowingly and wished her well. She enrolled in culinary school, finally pursuing the dream she'd put on hold for years while caring for her grandmother and working double shifts. Albert, meanwhile, found new investors, smaller firms, more principled people who cared about his company's mission rather than his personal life. The investment was significantly less than Sterling's offer, but it came without conditions, without compromises, without demands that he sacrifice his integrity. One Saturday morning, 3 months after the proposal, Albert asked Claire to go for a drive. "I have something to show you. Close your eyes." "Albert Fischer, what are you plotting?" "Trust me." When she opened her eyes, they were parked in front of a beautiful, historic brick building in the Arts District. A for sale sign hung in the window, but someone had added a handwritten banner below it: "Future home of Robert's Bistro." Claire turned to Albert completely speechless, tears already forming. "You didn't." "I did," Albert said, grinning with pure joy. "It's yours. Well, it will be once you sign the papers. Full commercial kitchen, completely accessible design throughout. Space for 45 diners, outdoor patio for summer. Your dream restaurant, Claire. No strings attached, no obligations. Just your dream, made real." She burst into tears, kissing him so fiercely she nearly pulled him out of his wheelchair. "This is too much. I can't accept." "It's not nearly enough," Albert interrupted firmly. "You gave me my life back, Claire. You showed me I was worthy of love. Let me give you your dream. Please." Claire held his face in her hands. "You already gave me the proper proposal, didn't you? The one that wasn't in front of your hostile mother." Albert laughed and pulled out another ring box, simpler, more intimate. He maneuvered himself to kneel properly this time, without an audience, in front of the building that would become their shared legacy. "Claire Roberts, will you build a life with me? Will you let me support your dreams while you continue to support mine? Will you marry me, not as a dramatic statement to my family, but as a genuine promise between us?" "Yes," Claire said, laughing through her tears. "Yes to all of it. Forever, yes." Robert's Bistro opened 10 months later on a perfect spring evening. The restaurant had a revolutionary hiring policy. 50% of the staff had to be individuals with disabilities. Claire had created an inclusive, fully accessible environment where everyone, employees and customers alike, felt valued and seen as complete human beings. The bistro became famous not just for its incredible food, but for its radical approach to employment and dignity. The wedding took place 2 weeks after the restaurant opening, in the garden space behind Robert's Bistro. It was intimate, joyful, and meaningful. Robert Fischer walked Claire down the aisle, his eyes wet with pride, while Camila watched from the front row, dabbing at tears with an embroidered handkerchief. She'd apologized to Claire 6 weeks earlier, a genuine, tearful apology, where she admitted that watching her son find authentic love had forced her to confront her own shallow, image-obsessed values. But the most meaningful moment came during the reception when Albert stood from his wheelchair with Claire's support and announced the creation of the Fisher-Roberts Initiative. The foundation, funded by both Albert's personal wealth and all profits from Robert's Bistro, was dedicated to creating accessible housing and employment opportunities for people with disabilities nationwide. "This foundation represents everything our relationship stands for," Albert said, holding Claire's hand tightly. "The radical idea that everyone, regardless of physical ability, social status, or bank account, deserves dignity, opportunity, and love. Claire taught me that I was worthy. Now we want to teach that same lesson to everyone who's been told they're not enough." 3 years later,
The Fisher-Roberts Initiative had created over 500 accessible jobs across 8 states and built 12 affordable, fully accessible housing complexes. Roberts Bistro had expanded to 3 locations, each one a thriving hub of inclusive employment, each one proving that accessibility and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Albert and Claire sat in the original bistro one quiet Tuesday morning, watching the diverse staff prepare for lunch service. People in wheelchairs, people with visual impairments, people with cognitive disabilities, all working together seamlessly. Claire's head rested on Albert's shoulder, her hand absently playing with her wedding ring. Do you ever regret it? The Sterling Capital deal? $500 million is a lot of impact we could have made. Albert laughed and kissed the top of her head. Not for a single second. That $500 million would have built a bigger company, sure. But walking away from it built a better life, a meaningful life. You taught me that my worth isn't measured in dollars or physical ability. It's measured in the love I give and receive, the lives I touch, the integrity I maintain. That lesson is priceless, Claire. Literally priceless. Claire kissed his cheek, tasting salt from her own tears. For what it's worth, that night at the Blackstone, the worst night of your life, when Carmen humiliated you, was actually the best night of my life, because it led me directly to you, because it taught me that sometimes the worst moments create space for the best people to enter, because it proved that real love sees the whole person and says, you are enough exactly as you are. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their shared dream bustling with life around them. Carmen McBroom had tried to tell Albert he was broken, unworthy, a liability. Claire Roberts had proven he was complete, valuable, and exactly right. And together, they'd built something that would outlast any investment, any balance sheet, any shallow definition of worth. That was worth more than all the money in the world. If you watched or listened up to this point, comment the country you are watching this from. Represent your country. And remember, the measure of our humanity isn't what we have or how we look, but who we choose to see, love, and lift up in this world.